Longevity has become one of those buzzwords that we're hearing quite a bit. There have been books, podcasts, many influencers on Instagram, YouTube that talk in the health space about longevity and health span. So, longevity meaning how long we live on the planet, and health span is the quality of those years. If you are interested in maximizing your health span, then today's podcast is definitely going to be of interest for you. I have with me today Chris Burres on the show. Chris is a published author, host of the Uncovering the Secrets to Longevity Health Summit, and a patent owner with a surprising little twist. He's not just a visionary scientist, but also a master of comedy improv. I thought that was really cool. Chris is the founder and chief scientist at MyVitalC, where he manufactures a Nobel Prize winning molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experiment result in history of being a full 90% extension of life. We're going to talk about that research and what it means for us. And as a research engineer and a scientist, his primary mission is really to help other people to live longer, healthier, and happier lives with science. Chris, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here.
Carol, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share kind of new information. Your audience seems interested in longevity, and we can talk a little bit about kind of equating longevity and health span, and then this kind of miraculous 90% extension of life study, the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history.
Wow. Why don't we start with the study, unpack what was it and what it meant?
Well, let's go back and why did they even, first off, I'm going to start with that study was initially a toxicity study. It was not a longevity study. And let's roll back and go well, what were they investigating? So I'm holding up a model of a molecule. This is a podcast, so you very well may be listening, and I'll give you visual cues. Imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms in the shape of a sphere. The molecule was discovered in 1985, and the three scientists who discovered it won the Nobel Prize in 1996. The molecule's actually absolutely amazing. A miraculous discovery is very accurate. The molecule, I like to describe it as performing as well or better than the current best material in almost every application. So it makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells. And all of those things are isn't this health and longevity related? You're talking about batteries. Usually people don't look at a car battery and go, what components of that car battery should I be consuming for my longevity and a long health span? And that's where the story kind of gets worse. You already know it was supposed to be a toxicity study. The scientists actually thought that the molecule would be toxic. Instead of being toxic, they put it in this study, and instead of being toxic, the test subjects that they gave it to, in this case it was Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group. So again, the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history. And that kind of really shifted my business partner and I, who've been manufacturing this molecule since 1991. And in that original research, which was published in 2012, where the rats lived 90% longer, our lab provided the material. Our lab is mentioned in that study. So we really are not only were we manufacturing and selling the molecule before the scientists won the Nobel Prize, right? So discovery 85, us starting manufacturing 91, Nobel Prize in 96. We also are the lab that provided the material in this original study. And so it's been that's been the quantum shift for us from being happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientists, kind of thrust into this health supplement space, and then this longevity space. And you mentioned books. I have a book of my own, Live Longer and Better. I've got the Longevity Summit. I've just launched a podcast, Live Beyond the Norms. And so it's been, you might imagine, as a former carbon nanomaterial scientist, I still am. We still sell to research institutions around the world, but that was my focus. Now my focus is kind of health and longevity and a long health span. It's been exciting. You're in the space, you know how fun it is, and you know how perplexing at times it is, and how much joy you can get when people just get one little nugget from you and implement that in their lives and then make significant changes. It's just amazing.
So, how does this translate to human beings? So I'm thinking about this study with rats because I can almost hear people's questions as they listen to
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
How are we able to make these conclusions and from the study of rats? What is the connection there?
So you ask a very when I first really started focusing on this original study, that was when I was really on two quests. One quest was, is there a longer longevity experimental result on mammals? And the answer is no. The next best way to live longer is actually calorie restriction. If you reduce your calories by 30%, these are their studies in multiple animal models, so this is extremely likely to be true. If you reduce your calories consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. No one really likes that diet. No one's maybe they need a new PR company or something. But even that is a 30% extension. So this is 90. So we solidly sit. If you are thinking about a molecule that is in the longevity space, you should be thinking. And by the way, we call this molecule ESS60. And that stands for elemental because it's carbon only, safe spheres, ESS60, elemental safe spheres with the 60 atoms. So that is the molecule that you would be looking for. And then, so the first quest was, is there a longer experiment? The second quest was, well, I mean, this study wasn't done in Wistar rats. What is the applicability of what happens to a rat as you kind of migrate that to a human? And so I'm like, every podcast I was on, every interaction I was having with any scientist, I'm like, hey, do we have a number? And I think intuitively we know that there is a number. I don't know that we'll ever have the exact number, right? But I happen to be, my business partner's office is like right on the other side of the wall from me. And I heard him talking to a Dr. Paul Kudabek. He's out of the University of DePaul. And Dr. Paul Kudabek, he does many rat studies and then carries them into human studies. And I kind of heard this through the wall. I'm like, oh, so I popped around like, hey, Dr. Kudabek, I have to ask you, like, what percentage? And he told this kind of lengthy story, which I think is really telling. He said, many scientists will say that what happens to a rat doesn't happen in a human, and they'll give you this particular case study. There was a case study where they were looking at a morning sickness drug, and they gave it to, of course, pregnant rats. I don't know exactly how you know if the rat has morning sickness or not. Like, I'm assuming it was, if they were throwing up, they had morning sickness, but you obviously can't ask them if their tummy is not feeling well, right? Which is a lot of, I think, the bad part. But it worked. It seemed to work, and so they carried it into human trials. Unfortunately, in the human trials, they noticed some small percentage of fetuses were deformed while on this drug. And Dr. Kudabak said, and that's what scientists will say. See what happens in a rat doesn't happen. You can't. They just don't translate. And then Dr. Kudabak continued, and he said, but the problem was, if they had ever looked at the fetuses of the rats, they would have noticed the deformities, and they would have never carried this to a human trial, right? And so that's a scientist who takes rat studies to human studies, saying the one place where people really hang their hat saying what happens on a rat doesn't happen in a human isn't even a valid example. And the other thing I like to point out, it turns out that from a genetic profile, we are more genetically similar to rats than rats are to mice, right? And that's so counterintuitive. And I just point that out because our intuition about genetics and applicability, our intuition is not very good. What I read that to mean that and there's a very specific reason that it is a requirement to do studies on rats before you take them to larger primates, because we are so similar genetically to the rats.
That's interesting because I would have thought the same. Okay, rats, mice, they would be more genetically the same than to a human being. So that is very interesting that it doesn't, translate through that way.
Yeah.
Now, you're doing this study on longevity. What do you think was the driver of the longevity. What
Yep.
effect was its ESS 60? What effect
Yep.
was that having?
So the first thing that I've gone through some iterations over the years as it's been kind of my responsibility to understand this thing. Where we are at now is what is called the boss theory, but I'll kind of walk you through everything. We'll start with our most consistent testimonial is people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. If all it did was improve sleep, that could in fact have an impact on longevity. We know sleep is good for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being, which would kind of explain a lot of the testimonials that we get from customers taking the product. To get more scientific than that, if you look at the medical community's thought process around aging, the medical community typically thinks of aging as an oxidation or an inflammation process. In fact, there's a phrase called inflammaging. You did a podcast recently on inflammation. I don't know if inflammaging came up, but you were certainly dancing around the concept that inflammation, not good, like causes aging, right? So our product ticks both of those boxes, and I can jump into those. From an antioxidant perspective, there's an ad hoc study on the web that shows our product to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. There's a peer-reviewed published paper showing it to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. Again, vitamin C is that go-to. If you got a cold, you got sniffles, you're under the weather, or whatever, you're going after vitamin C. We're 125 times more powerful than that. And I'm going to come back to that because that antioxidant capability is a key component of the boss theory. The next one is inflammation, right? And we have to be very careful. The FDA has very specific guidelines. What we're allowed to say is that our product addresses inflammation caused by exercise. You love to exercise. You've certainly felt inflammation the next day. Even people who don't exercise that much, but just go for a much longer walk than normal. You feel that inflammation in your body. We absolutely address that inflammation. And I'll share with you, we actually have a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion, Anthony Kunkel, who loves our product. And he's an interesting case study because what he says is he doesn't believe that our product helps speed recovery. He believes it prevents damage in the first place, which is kind of amazing. And he says this because on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run, that's a phrase you don't hear very often, where strength and stability were previously an issue, now they're not an issue, right? If it were helping recovery, he would feel crappy after the race. Normally it would take 10 days, and with MyVitalC, I would recover in 3. That's just not even the case. I'm ready to go at the end of a 50-mile run. And he's actually, I think, just won 3 like Spartan and Tough Mudder, whatever competitions, first place, right? So he's just that kind of athlete. So that's the exercise inflammation that we definitely address. What the FDA doesn't allow us to say is that we address any other type of inflammation, because that's actually a chronic inflammation. Those are directly associated with the diseases of aging. That's arthritis, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, cancers, and we just have a lot more research to do. I will throw in one very unique aspect. At one point, my director of research, who's a former practicing gynecologist, told me that the original paper published in 2012 that used our material could have been 5 separate papers. And one aspect, because there was so much going on in that particular paper, one aspect of it was it was tumor. So a typical Wistar rat lives about 32 months and has a known amount of tumor mass in its body. The longer it lives, the more tumor mass it has in its body. Even though the MyVitalC rats lived out to 62 months, none of them had any tumors, right? Right. So this goes into, and I tell that story, and a lot of people are like, oh, cure for cancer. And then the answer to that is no. No, that is not what that's saying. It is so much more challenging to address a cancer that has metastasized than to be a cancer preventative, which is really the implication here. And we know things as simple as exercise, good nutrition, good sleep are cancer preventative. So that's kind of the implication there. And just to kind of wrap up inflammation, we fit perfectly in the anti-inflammatory diet. If you think about the blue zones and their anti-inflammatory diet, those are people who tend to have reduced incidences of stroke, reduced incidences of heart attacks. They tend to live longer. We fit perfectly in that diet. So that's the inflammation and the oxidation antioxidant kind of perspective. That's kind of my journey. And then this last one is the current theory. And what we like to say is this soccer ball shaped ESS60 molecule is the BOSS, where BOSS stands for buffering oxidative stress system. So we know from peer-reviewed published research that this molecule gets into the mitochondria. And then we're going to go down a little mitochondrial path. Your audience is probably familiar. Most people know mitochondria, the powerhouse of every cell.
Yeah.
And what that means, just like most powerhouses on the planet, is that they're negative byproducts, right? Your car going down the road has the exhaust. The power plant has the smokestack. In the case of mitochondria, the negative components are reactive oxygen species. Those are the ones that run around and do the oxidative damage if they're not managed. Inherent to mitochondria are the two management chemicals, glutathione and melatonin. By the way, melatonin is the sleep hormone. Our most consistent testimonial is better sleep. So there's all sorts of kind of, they're closing the loop here. But we know different parts of our body can get depleted of different components at different times. So when a mitochondria is depleted of glutathione and melatonin, that's when those reactive oxygen species can run around and do damage. And that's also when we believe this ESS60 molecule comes into play and acts kind of like a paddy wagon. So I've got this analogy. It's Mardi Gras. It's Bourbon Street. Mardi Gras is over. The drunk reactive oxygen species are running around and spray painting things and smashing windows and tearing down light poles. And the police, the glutathione and melatonin, come in and they handcuff themselves to these reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. But what do the police do when they run out, when there's no more available glutathione or melatonin? That's where this can hold. We know way back in the 90s, this can hold up to 6 negatively charged particles. We know that reactive oxygen species are negatively charged particles. So we believe this holds up to 6 reactive oxygen species, preventing them from doing damage until that glutathione and melatonin can be replenished. They can come and handcuff themselves to those reactive oxygen species and again, get them off of Bourbon Street. And that's the BOSS theory. And one of the things that's nice about that theory is we literally have testimonials from head to toe, like hair growing faster, original color, a toe. This is kind of crazy, but an influencer we work with, when he was 5, a crab bit his toe and split his big toenail. It was split until he was 65. After he started taking our product, that toenail finally healed. So like we literally have testimonials from head to toe, just like your question was kind of more broadly, like why was there longevity? Well, why do we have testimonials from head to toe? If you're helping the mitochondria, remember every cell in your body has between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria, except for your brain cells and neurons, which have 2 million mitochondria. So if you're improving the mitochondria or just reducing the damage, the negative impact of mitochondria when it's overwhelmed, you're going to have systemic improvements that we have in testimonials.
Interesting. Where do you think research is going with this in the future? Because I'm assuming we're not done. We have more testing to do. What do you see on the horizon for this?
So our goal, and let me be honest, in this field, we're the only ones pushing research forward. We recently published with the original researcher from that original paper out of the University of Paris. That's a Dr. Fathi Musa. He was the lead researcher. And we published just a kind of a standard toxicity study. If you're going to take these into like a Whole Foods or something, they're asking for a very specific battery of tests. We're doing those and publishing those. The goal is to actually recreate the original rat study. Like just to imagine, no one will ever do a longevity study on humans, because if humans live 90% longer, the average human will live to 152. Now, this is how limited our mindset is about longevity. I say 152. Everyone thinks, oh, the oldest lived human. And that's not what that means. The average human, right, our average age right now is in the 80s. 152 is, or like kind of high 70s. 152 is the average. There'll be people who live much longer and, of course, much shorter. So, that longevity study won't be done. We're moving in the direction of being able to, and it's really expensive, of recreating the original study. The way the scientific process is supposed to work is you have a theory. Ironically, the theory here was that the molecule was toxic. You put it in a study, you get a result, and then some other institution needs to recreate that result. We're 12 years later, and we still haven't recreated that initial result. And so that's something that we're doing. It turns out, right, so that's a 5-year study on rats. It turns out the way that the guidelines are, you cannot pay for that as you're going through it. You must pay everything up front. And the reason is because they don't want organizations to run out of money and then have to euthanize all of the animals that were involved in the study. Like, you need to be able to carry the study all the way through. So we're definitely, that's what we're moving in the direction of, doing that kind of longer study. And so we're saving up for that, and we'll actually be making some adjustments, some interesting aspect of the original study. So one, people ask, like, what would be a standard serving? We say a standard serving is about 1 teaspoon. So you're talking about a teaspoon of oil, which for some people, if you're not used to, 2 things. If you're not used to a high quality extra virgin olive oil, it can leave a peppery flavor at the back of your throat. So we get some customers like, hey, it's a pepper, it's burning. Is it rancid? No, that's a high quality extra virgin olive oil. And then the others, if you're not used to oil in general, consuming it, it can make your stool loose for a couple of days, and then your body gets used to it, and it's no big deal. Those are literally the only complaints that we have. But it's about a teaspoon. In the original study, they didn't start giving any dosing to the rats until month 10, and then they stopped at month 17. Our intent is not to stop at month 17, to continue. And so we think that we're going to get more than a 90% extension of life.
Now, you're talking about putting this in a supplement form, or it is in a supplement form.
Yep.
And I'm assuming there have been others to do this, maybe not properly. Can it be toxic if it's not done correctly?
Yeah, so if you think about this 60 carbon atom molecule, right? In scientific terms, it's carbon 60 or C60. And there are people who actually at some point they used to buy from us. We are the largest manufacturer and distributor, and certainly oldest manufacturer and distributor. And the way I like to describe it is C60 is for industrial applications. And there's peer-reviewed published research that proves if you process it improperly, it's harmful. ESS60 is C60 that's been processed for safer human consumption.
Okay. And then being in a carrier oil, am I thinking of this correctly? That's part of how it's
very
delivered?
Important. Yeah, very important. So when you take a lot of these ESS60 molecules and if you were to hold a handful of them, it just looks like a black powder, and there's small ESS60 crystals, so kind of like sugar crystals or salt crystals that you might have. You can consume it. It's totally safe. It's just not bioavailable. It turns out that the ESS60 molecule is not water soluble, so if you consume it, you would just excrete it out. By dissolving it in a carrier oil, and really it's not just a carrier oil, it's actually a solution, you're breaking down those crystals to the monomolecular level. So you have these soccer ball shaped ESS60 molecules floating around in the oil. And just for a point of reference, 1 drop of our product has 400 times more of these molecules than you have cells in your body.
Wow.
Like, it's a fantastically small molecule.
Let's say somebody, comes, they start taking the product. What can they expect, and how long does it take before they feel these effects? Do they have immediate energy? Is that the first thing they notice? Better sleep? What is happening there?
So I'll share a couple things. And just to reiterate, our most consistent testimonial, people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. That's just across the board. In fact, I've got an Oura ring. I don't know, you've probably played around with sleep trackers. Yeah. I was working with a consultant for Oura Ring to do a sleep study, because I'm like, hey, this is something that we can do. We've got these sleep trackers. Unfortunately, that was pre-pandemic, and he basically the Aura Ring was pretty good at identifying COVID, and so he got sidetracked and was on all sorts of other projects. But I did carry it forward, and we've had 10 people go through our own sleep study. This is a survey sleep study where we surveyed people and we asked them. We did two aspects. First aspect, we surveyed them 10 days prior to taking the product, 10 days on the product, 10 days off the product, and then 10 days back on the product. And the questions we asked were like, how easy was it to fall asleep? How restless were you? How did you feel the next morning? I think there was one more. But across the board, when they were on our product, 100% of the participants showed improvements or reported improvements in their sleep, right? So sleep is one of those things. It's also one of those very intangible things, right? So we all get plus or minus 15 minutes, maybe plus or minus an hour, and don't even think twice about it. But if you continue to get deeper sleep, it's really hard to notice. And I'll give you a couple examples related to sleep. There was one lady who was in the office next door, and I went to her and I gave her a couple of bottles. She was going through some oncology stuff, and I was like, "Here, just try this." And I went back to her like 5 days later, and I was like, "So, have you noticed anything?" And she looked, she felt bad. She's like, "Chris, I haven't really noticed anything." And I was like, "Well, how's your sleep?" And her eyes just got like bright, Bambi big, right? And she's like, "I've been waking up at 5:30," and she's former military. "I've been waking up at 5:30 like every day, ready to go." Okay, there you go. You don't even notice it when it comes to sleep. In terms of how fast, I've got one testimonial. A lady out of the UK gave us a testimonial, and in her testimonial that she recorded that video at the end of the day of her first trying it, she goes, "I didn't finish my cup of coffee today," right? So she didn't need her coffee. My business coach describes it this way. He says, "For 50 years, I needed an alarm clock to wake up. Whenever I'm taking MyVitalC," because he falls off of it every now and then, "when I'm taking it, I wake up before the alarm clock." And this is a business coach, right? So he's out networking, having wine, doing all the schmoozing you have to do, and he's still waking up before the alarm clock. Now, on the opposite end, we actually have a lady, Gwen. She's our largest distributor here in Houston. And I did a video with her, and she shared with me in the video, if you had asked me, well, first, she never intended to take the product. She actually bought it for her dog, and noticed such a profound difference in her Shih Tzu that she was like, "Okay, I want to take it." And one of the things I love about that is there's no placebo effect with dogs, right? The dog isn't smart enough to know, "Oh, I got a dropper of my product. We have a dog product. I don't have it on my desk, but I got that dropper today, so I need to have more energy today." Like, that's how humans work. Dogs don't work that way. So she started taking it, and she shared in that video that at the 3-month mark, she would have told me that she hadn't noticed anything. Like, she hadn't noticed anything at all. And then she said, "But I stopped and I kind of took stock of my life. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm waking up. I'm working later than I used to, right? Another hour a day. I'm waking up early. I was never a morning person." And then arguably the worst testimonial about a supplement you will ever hear, we don't put it in any literature, she shared that she cleaned her garage. Now, it's easier, like, that's not going on any commercial, but it does mean something, right? There's whether it's the emotional baggage that might be in the garage, or it's just the energy. I can share my own story. I used to take 2 naps before noon on Saturdays and Sundays. And the way that would work, I would wake up. I have twins. They were younger, cartoon age. I would lay on the couch. They would literally sit physically on top of me to watch cartoons, and I would take my first nap. So, by the way, one of my friends pointed out that's brilliant parenting, because if they were to get up and mess around with stuff, they would wake you up. Like, so we had built-in kid tracker. And then I would go downstairs, have breakfast, come back up, resume the position, and take the second nap. As soon as I started taking MyVitalC on a regular basis, I no longer was taking those naps. And honestly, back then, my kids are 14 now, so that's not going to happen. But back then, I would like get there and then like, well, I don't like watching cartoons and I'm not falling asleep, so I'm gonna go do something. And that could be why Gwen actually got her garage cleaned.
Mm. Yeah, the garage to me speaks of many things because a person is not very motivated. At least I'm not. I walk out in that garage and I want to just, okay,
Close
let
the
me
door.
turn around, close the door, and think about it another day. It's just not on my list of things I want to do. Go clean out the garage. It's going to be a daunting task. So it does speak to even just being able to get that motivation and energy to want to do something that's not exciting like that. Now,
Yeah.
you were talking about your own personal experience. And I remember when I was reading through your materials, that initially you had some reservations about the product, about developing a supplement. Can you talk a little bit about what those reservations were and how you got past them?
Yeah. So the study comes out in 2012, right? The rats live 90% longer. We started getting calls in mid 2013, and the calls were like, "Hey, how much of this should I be taking?" And my business partner and I, we're conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. We're like, wait a minute, you're asking me how much of this stuff that we sell to institutions around the world to put into ink, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much of that should you be consuming? We're going to go with 0, right? And we actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid 2013. So think about that. Start manufacturing in 91. We don't have to have not for human consumption because it's not on anybody's radar. Crazy study comes out, supposed to have been a toxicity study. Crazy, wacky biohackers, which I can say now because I am definitely a biohacker now, start going, how do I get that in my body? And we say, no, not for human consumption. So that was mid 2013. Through the years, like every quarter, we're getting about 2 calls a week. And the calls are kind of crazy. They're like, hey, my knee pain is gone. And we're like, you mean the knee pain of your rat, right? Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And they're like, yeah. How much should a 275-pound rat be taking? And we're like, okay. So we're getting 2 of those calls a week. I actually found an article, and my business partner are getting together every quarter going, do we want to be in this industry? Extremely different industry than selling to research institutions around the world, right? One thing is when we sell to a research institution, they either take that product, take that black powder that we sold them, they give it to a grad student, they give it to a research associate, they have an HPLC, they know how to test it, so the standards for us delivering that product are just so high. Not so much in the supplement industry, right? Like you don't have an HPLC in your garage. So if I send something to you, you're not running back into your, let me make sure Chris sent me, the right concentration of the ESS60 molecule. And in this time where we're debating, I actually found a peer-reviewed published article where the researchers had purchased a number of supplements off the market, and 50% of them did not have in them what they said they had in them, right? So this was an industry that my business partner and I like, we don't want to go here. Finally, in 2017, latter part of 2017, a guy with a big YouTube following started talking about all the benefits he was getting, taking it on a daily basis. And our phone went from 2 calls a week to 10 calls a day. And that's when my business partner like, okay, well, this is a different story, right? We're conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. We're also entrepreneurs. And by the way, you're going to retract and just reiterate. When we put not for human consumption on our labeling, the scientific literature was clear that it was safe. We were just conservative scientists, right? Like again, inks, batteries, tires, photocells. I don't know how that translates to human. I know he and I both tried like a bottle at that point, didn't really notice it, so we weren't that uncomfortable with people consuming it. We were just uncomfortable with the kind of concept, right? So 2018, we start getting this 10 calls a day. And my business partner and I, we asked ourselves 2 questions. The first is a moral question. Are we comfortable selling it? I take it. My wife takes it. Everybody on our team takes it. It's not a requirement to work here, but everybody does take it because they have access to the literature and really access to the testimonials, right? Our customer service team has the joy of fielding all of these amazing testimonials. The next issue that you've got to take care of is the FDA and the FTC. And I don't think I've said it, but I will throw it in. The FDA has not evaluated our product. It is not intended to treat, diagnose, prevent, or cure any disease. So you got to cross those T's and you got to dot those I's for the FDA and the FTC. And that's when we brought this product to market in 2018. And that was really what shot me down the path of, where does this study sit? Like, how important is the 90% extension of life? What are the other ways to extend life? What are the other ways to extend health span? You talked about longevity and health span. And one of the goals has to be to make sure that your longevity, your lifespan equals your health span, right? I think the best analogy when I was doing that longevity summit, and by the way, I'm releasing all of those talks on my podcast, Live Beyond the Norms. One of the focuses has to be, or one of the best analogies is a candle, right? A candle just burns all the way to the end, right? But a good solid flame, and then it's done. Right now, the data is saying 20% of our lives are in some sort of, disability, and people don't want that. And so what are we going to do to make sure that our health span and our lifespan equate? And that's when I ended up coming up with the book, Live Longer and Better, which is really the story of the ESS60 molecule, and then some of the learning that I have and sharing some of that learning. And then I'm working on another book, actually working on another 2 books to really keep that moving forward. Again, for that summit, I interviewed 55 experts, including Ben Greenfield, Dr. Stephen Gundry, Dave Asprey, and 53 other longevity experts. So that's kind of been my journey.
Now, you were talking about the different things we can do for health span for longevity, and I'm assuming things like nutrition, sleep, even sense of community. When people feel part of community and their mental health is better, the physical health is going to be better. What I see often is people look for the one thing. They do it with hormone replacement therapy. They do it with supplements. Anytime I make a post on one of those 2 topics, I get so many messages. And I'm always, telling them, well, you've got to have these other lifestyle factors in place. Yes, the right supplements can make a difference. I do believe the right quality supplements can. HRT can, but you've got to have all of the pieces. Now, have you had an instance where you've been able to see, okay, somebody is doing all of the things, and then they add this in, the MyVitalC, but then maybe somebody else is just relying solely on that? Does that make sense? Do you see that difference?
I know what you're saying. So I think that you are going to experience benefits if you're not in the healthiest, if you don't have the healthiest practices. And I'm actually working on a 6-week longevity course where we'll go in and address, and the first entire week is just about mindset, because I think that's actually the most important thing. Because the reality is, so when I interviewed the 55 experts, I asked all of them, give me 2 habits, mindsets, protocols, let's call them shortcuts, because everybody likes shortcuts, for longevity or long health span that you would share. And then we aggregated the data, and 33.3% mentioned sleep. I think 45% mentioned nutrition. Another 45% mentioned exercise. And then it was, I think the last one was sleep. And I think it was like 25%. It was lower than mindset. And my first thought was, I think they got this wrong, because sleep is so important, right? Like you literally will die if you don't get sleep. Like that's just an absolute fact. And you think about how detrimental it is to our existence to be sleeping, right? Instead of finding a mate, instead of finding food, we're actually just laying there doing nothing. That's how important it is. Like that's a measure of how important it is. But later I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? If you know you need to make dietary changes and you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to do it. If you know you need to make exercise, movement changes, and you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to. If you even sleep, if you know you need to be going to sleep at the same time, you need to get your 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep opportunity every night, you need to be waking up at the same time, you need to put your device down an hour at least before you go to sleep. If you're going to have one drink, which you shouldn't, but have it at least an hour and a half before you go to sleep so it doesn't negatively impact your sleep. If you don't have the mindset to do those things, then nothing's going to work. And so the first week of that course is entirely about mindset, just mindset. Don't worry about nutrition. Don't worry about movement. Don't worry about sleep. Just focus on mindset because I think that is the most powerful thing. So, Pete, I believe that you will see benefits if you aren't doing all the things. And then if you are doing all the things, you will also see benefits. But this is not, I don't believe this is, those rats that live 90% longer were not sedentary rats eating the SAD diet, the standard American diet, right?
Yeah.
They were regular rats. They were running on their treadmill and they lived healthy rat lives. They just lived them 90% longer.
I love that you hit on the mindset, because I see that too, working with health coaching clients, that sometimes you can have, all of your ducks in a row, so to speak. You can have, the best nutrition protocol, the best exercise protocol, all the lifestyle habits, and then they're still not getting results. And then when I start to kind of peel back the layers, I realize there's some emotional blocks there, or perhaps they perceive age very negatively, or they perceive menopause very negatively. And I know there was a study, believe it was out of Harvard, where they looked at individuals. I've not looked at the criticism of this study at all, so I don't know, but they looked at individuals over the course, I think it was 4 years, and found that those who had positive attitudes about aging had better outcomes as far as chronic, developing chronic disease, whereas those that had that real negative downer kind of attitude,
Yeah.
their outcomes weren't as positive.
Well, that even goes to, there's a study, and I don't even remember where it's out of, looking at stress and your attitude about stress. And if your attitude is that stress is a stressor from which you can benefit, you actually experience less of the traumatic aspects of stress, less of the negative aspects of stress. If you believe stress is just stress and it's something that you wish would go away, but we live in a modern society, so it's not going to, then you actually experience significantly worse effects from that stress. And so your mindset about the thing that some will perceive as negative and some will perceive as a way to learn or as a way to expand their skill set, that mindset really makes a difference on the outcome of what you're doing.
Oh, I lost you for a second there.
Yeah, I think the hurricane is still having a little bit of impact on our internet.
Yes, for the listeners, Chris has been right in hurricane territory.
Yep.
So, but glad you're here and safe, and we'll try to get through this. Thankfully, Riverside's very forgiving, so it cleans up that video and audio, so we're good.
Yes.
I didn't want to neglect to ask you, because I'm so interested in this, and it really has nothing to do with science. But what is the comedy piece? You did improv comedy?
So I just had the fortunate opportunity. My wife is a member of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and by the way, her little sister, who I really consider my little sister because we were together at the time and still are, her little sister runs my office. Right. So through the Big Brother Big Sister program, she runs our office. But in that program, there was an improv theater down the road, and they were supporting Big Brother's Big Sister by helping the bigs and littles do stuff together, improv together. And I went one day, and then I took a course, and I loved the course, and I took the course the second time, and the graduation ceremony for the course was to be on stage and have your family members pay $5 and come and watch you graduate, right? And which is to perform. And I remember just like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it really big. And I was kind of really good at it. And so they invited me to join their regular troupe. And so I was with their regular troupe for 5 years. And I really miss it. Like, obviously it helps with these if I've got to, come off the cuff. But it really was I call it a brain break, because when you're on stage doing comedy improv, you actually can't be thinking about anything. Yeah, you might have an idea of where the scene is going to go, but if the thing that your partner, your comedy improv partner shares with you doesn't support where you thought it was going to go, you got to drop it. And then you got to go on this fantastic journey with them. You cannot go on whatever journey is stuck in your head. So I highly recommend people do improv, especially if you want to do any sort of public speaking, if you want to even be on a podcast. The concept of yes and one of the fundamental concepts is, like, my job in this broadcast is to make Carol look amazing. Like, And that's easier, right? If your job is like to make me look amazing and my job is to make you look amazing, then we don't have to focus on ourselves. We have to focus on the other person.
Ooh, I love that. Two things that focusing on the other person, kind of a team. And then I love that you learned something that had to, in the beginning, be a little bit intimidating and that you know, jumped right in. And then, of course, humor. I mean, what a
Yeah.
beautiful way. We're talking longevity, and this plays right in, learning something new, getting outside of yourself, and also humor. So absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Now, I know you have a hard stop, Chris, and I really want to be respectful of your time. So, a couple of questions.
Yep.
I know you have something for the listener, and I would love for you to share how listeners can get a hold of you and follow your work. But was there anything that I didn't touch on that you would like the listeners to know? Anything that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff. There's a study out there that probably most of your audience wasn't aware of, a 90% extension of life. There's good science behind it. Some of it peer reviewed to support its efficacy. There's a book you can go kind of read the story and learn more. It's Live Longer and Better, and you can actually find that book it is on Amazon, or it's at livelongerandbetterbook.com. I'll share. Well, let me give you this link if you're interested in trying the product or taking advantage of this charity piece that I do. Just go to myvitalc.com / forever fit, and that'll take you to a landing page. We're gonna have a coupon code there for $15 off. And so you can find that coupon code on that page. Again, myvitalc.com / forever fit. You can get the book for $20 on Amazon, or on our website, it's also $20. But you can pay an extra $10 and I'll sign it. So I'll autograph it. 100% of that $10 fee goes to a charity called Operation Underground Railroad. You may remember a movie, The Sound of Freedom. I was actually just on a news clip today, and it's apparently, I don't know, the top, some kind of movie. It's on the top 10 list. Maybe even pay for downloads right now or something. I happened to see that guy speak, the real guy, not the actor, speak before the week the movie came out. I was at an event. That's a moving thing. The movie's moving. And so the full signature fee, and I actually have a co-author. My co-author is a 2-time New York Times #1 bestseller, and his name's Dr. Corsi. So you can get a signature from both of us, and both of us is $15. That $15 or the $10 for my signature all go to Operation Underground Railroad. We just want to support that organization. And then if you go to the website again, myvitalc.com / forever fit. You can find the products. We sell it in 3 oils. We've got olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT oil. We always recommend the olive oil. That's where all the science is. That's also where you can get the highest concentration of the ESS60 molecule. You can save 20% by going on subscription. Don't worry, you can cancel at any time. Just take advantage of that. In fact, our customer service team has like 900 5-star reviews. They are not trained to talk you out of your subscription. They're trained to help you, and they do an amazing job. So just take advantage of that discount.
Wonderful, Chris. Thank you so much. I'll make sure this is all in the show notes for the listeners. And this has been a delight. I've learned a lot. It's been a very informative interview. I just really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your time.
Thank you so much, Carol.
And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.